The night shift is supposed to be quiet. A security guard's world shrinks to the glow of monitors, the hum of a machine, the slow tick of a clock. You're just there to watch, to walk through empty hallways and sleeping parking lots. You're the only one awake, the sole witness to a building breathing in its sleep. But sometimes, the cameras see things they aren't supposed to. They capture the moments that slide past rational thought, the little movements in the shadows that only seem to happen after 3 a.m., when the world is at its darkest. Your body knows you should be asleep. It's called the circadian rhythm. And when you fight it, things start to get weird. Fatigue, stress, and a heavy sense of being totally alone can make your senses fray at the edges. Was that a flicker on the screen? Or are your eyes just tired? Was that a noise down the hall? Or just the building settling? Tonight, we're looking at 6 stories from guards who stared into the monitors and saw the unbelievable. They asked themselves these same questions, only to discover the answers were far worse than they could have ever imagined. These are the moments caught on tape when the silence of the night was shattered by true horror. They call the hour between 3 and 4 a.m. the witching hour. It's when the veil between our world and whatever else is out there is at its thinnest. For most of us, it's just another hour of sleep. But for a security guard, alone and staring at a wall of screens, it can be the start of a living nightmare. What you're about to hear are stories from those guards, stories of flickering lights, of figures where nothing should be, and of that slow, creeping dread when you realize you are not alone in the dark. Section 1, The Mannequin, in aisle 4. Our first story comes from a guy named Dave, who took a night gig at a huge department store back in the late 90s. Think grainy, black and white cameras feeding into a loop of monitors in a tiny, windowless office. Dave's job was simple: watch the screens, walk the floors every 2 hours, and write down anything weird. For the first few months, the weirdest thing he saw was a mouse. The nights were long, quiet, and crushingly boring, the only sounds being the hum of refrigerators and the click of the monitor switching views. After dark, the store was like its own little city, populated by faceless, frozen mannequins. Dave always found them creepy on the low-res cameras. Their smooth heads looked like black holes, just swallowing the light. The trouble started, like it so often does, with just a feeling. It was a little after 3:15 a.m. Dave was sipping bad coffee, his eyes glazed over, watching the camera for women's apparel. There was a display near the escalators with 4 mannequins, a fake family dressed for a picnic. He'd walked past it 1,000 times. But tonight, something was off. He leaned in, squinting at the screen. He could have sworn one of the child mannequins had its head tilted at a new angle. He shook his head, blaming the exhaustion. He knew the night shift could mess with you, make you see things. It was nothing. He'd just walked past it an hour ago. He blinked and let the monitor cycle to the next camera. When it cycled back a minute later, his heart hammered against his ribs. The child mannequin's head wasn't just tilted anymore. It was turned a full 90 degrees, its blank face now staring directly at the mother mannequin next to it. Dave's breath caught. It had to be a prank. He grabbed his radio. "This is Dave at base. Anyone else in the building? Static." He followed the rules and logged it. 3:18 a.m. aisle. 4 mannequin appears to have been tampered with. Investigating. He rewound the VCR tape, watching the grainy footage. Nothing. No intruder. No glitch. 1 frame. The mannequin is looking forward. The very next frame, Its head is turned. It just happened. A cold dread started crawling up his spine. He tried to rationalize it. An escalator vibration was the head loose. He tried to believe it, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. He decided to break schedule and go see it for himself. He grabbed his heavy Maglite flashlight and stepped out of the office. The store was a cavern of long, twisted shadows. Every footstep echoed. As he got closer to women's apparel, the silence felt heavier. He found the display. The child mannequin was just as he'd seen on screen, head cranked to the side. He reached out a shaky hand and touched its plastic face, cold, solid. He tried to turn the head back, but it wouldn't move. It was locked in place. Real panic began to bubble up. He started backing away, his flashlight beam trembling. Get back to the office. Lock the door. Call the cops if he had to. As he turned to go, a soft, scraping sound echoed from behind him. He whipped around, shining his light back at the display. His blood went ice cold. The other mannequin, the adult female, had moved. Its arm, once cheerfully on its hip, was now stretched out, pointing straight down the main aisle, pointing directly toward the security office. Dave didn't need to see anything else. He ran. He didn't look back, just sprinted through the dark, his own panicked gasps loud in his ears. He burst into the security office, slammed the door, and fumbled with the lock. He collapsed into his chair, eyes glued to the monitor. The scene was frozen, the woman's arm pointing, the child's head turned. He watched, breathless, for the rest of his shift. Nothing else moved. When the morning manager arrived, a pale, trembling, Dave tried to explain. The manager walked with him to the display. The mannequins were perfect, all facing forward, all posed cheerfully. She gave Dave a pitying look and suggested he was working too many hours. Dave quit that day. He says that sometimes, when he closes his eyes, he can still see that smooth, plastic arm, pointing, a silent, horrifying invitation into the darkness. Section 2, The Echo in the Data Center. Our second story comes from an IT tech named Chloe, who took a night security job at a high-tech data center. This wasn't some dusty warehouse. It was a fortress of servers, a sterile, climate-controlled facility with biometric locks. The only sound was the constant, high-pitched hum of thousands of machines. Chloe's job was mostly monitoring systems from a command center, surrounded by screens showing server temperatures, network traffic, and CCTV feeds. The pay was great, mainly because the isolation was intense. For weeks, her nights were perfectly uneventful. But the phenomenon began on a Tuesday at exactly 3:15 a.m. Chloe was watching the feed for server Hall B, a huge room filled with identical black server racks. The camera at the far end, Cam B7, suddenly went black. A notification popped up, signal lost. Chloe sighed. Glitches happen. She logged it and tried a remote reboot. 3:15 a.m. Cam B7 signal lost. Attempting remote reboot. The reboot failed. 30 seconds later, at 3:15:30 a.m., the feed snapped back on. The hallway was empty, just as it should be. She didn't think much of it until the next night. At precisely 3:15 a.m., Cam B7 went black. 30 seconds later, it came back. A prickle of unease. Coincidences happen, but in a system built for precision, this was weird. She checked the server logs. No power fluctuation, no hardware error. According to the system, the camera had never gone offline. It was as if, for 30 seconds, it just stopped existing in their reality. This went on all week, every night. 3:15 a.m. Cam B7 would die for exactly 30 seconds. Chloe, a person of logic, knew there had to be an explanation. But as 3:15 approached each night, the hum of the servers seemed to hold its breath with her. The next Monday, she'd had enough. She was going to be in the room when it happened. She grabbed a tablet to watch the feeds and swiped her keycard into server hall B. The air was freezing, and the noise of the fans was a physical wall of sound. She walked to the far end of the hall and stood directly under Cam B7, looking up at its dark lens. On her tablet, she saw herself staring up. She watched the clock on her tablet, 3:14:55, 5 seconds. She held her breath. 3:15 per 0. The feed on her tablet went black. Signal lost. But in the hall, nothing had happened. The camera's little green power light was still on. The camera was working. It was recording, but something was blocking the signal. A terrifying thought hit her. What if an intruder was smart enough not just to hide from the cameras, but to control them? At 3:15:30, the feed on her tablet came back, but the image was wrong. On the screen, she saw herself looking up at the camera, but she wasn't alone. Standing directly behind her on the monitor was a tall, slender figure. It was a perfect silhouette, a shape of pure black that seemed to drink the harsh fluorescent light. It had no features, but its head was tilted down, as if it were studying her. Chloe screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the roar of the servers. She spun around, heart slamming in her chest. Nothing. The hallway was empty. She looked back at the tablet. The figure was gone. The feed was normal. She frantically rewound the footage. The 30-second blackout was there, logged as corrupted data. The moments before and after showed no figure. It had only existed on the live feed. A digital ghost that lived in the stream of data. Chloe never filed a report. Who would believe her? She transferred to the day shift the next week, taking a massive pay cut. She told her boss the night shift was ruining her sleep. And that was true. She couldn't sleep without seeing that black silhouette, that impossible figure standing right behind her. A silent passenger on an invisible stream of data. Section 3, The Child in the West Wing. This next story is from a hospital security guard named Frank. Part of his patrol was the West Wing, a section of the hospital that had been decommissioned for over a decade. Built in the 40s, it was a maze of peeling paint and dusty, old equipment, the former pediatric and maternity wards. Frank's job was to do one walkthrough each night to make sure no one had broken in, and to watch the 4 old, grainy cameras that still worked in there. Frank hated the West Wing. The air was heavy with the smell of decay. You could just feel the history of the place. But to him, it was just a creepy, empty building. One night, he was watching the monitor for the 3rd floor hallway, the old pediatric ward. For a split second, he saw something dart from one room to another at the far end of the hall. It looked small, like a child. He blinked, and it was gone. He figured it was just dust or an infrared reflection from the old camera. He logged it anyway. 3:33 a.m. possible motion detected West Wing, 3rd floor, likely dust. An hour later, he was watching the camera for the 4th floor, the old maternity ward, and he saw it again. This time it was clearer. A small, shadowy figure maybe the size of a 5-year-old, walked out of a room and stood in the middle of the hall. It was just a silhouette. It stood there for about 10 seconds, then zipped into the room across the hall with an unnatural speed. Frank's blood ran cold. That wasn't dust. He knew the wing was sealed tight. The only way in was a mag-locked door he had the only key card for. He rewound the footage. There it was. An unmistakable, child-sized figure. He checked the footage from an hour earlier on the 3rd floor. Knowing what to look for, he saw it again, a tiny, dark shape peeking out from a doorway. How was that possible? The stairs between floors were blocked by a heavy, chained gate. A primal fear kicked in, but his training took over. What if a child from the active pediatric ward had wandered in? He radioed the charge nurse. "This is Frank at security. Just a routine check. Are all your little patients accounted for?" The reply came back, calm and clear. "All accounted for, Frank. Quiet night here. Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," he lied. He had to go in. He swiped his card and pulled open the heavy steel door to the west wing. The temperature dropped, and the cold, stale air hit him. He cleared the first couple of floors. Nothing. He took the creaking elevator to the 3rd floor and walked the hall. The dust on the floor was thick and undisturbed. No footprints. He went up to the 4th floor. The silence here felt deeper. He stood where the figure had been, on camera, and called out, his voice sounding small. "Is anyone here? This is security." Only his own echo answered. He was about to leave, convinced the job was finally making him crack, when he heard it. A faint sound from the room the figure had entered. It was the soft, gentle melody of a music box. Frank froze, every instinct screaming at him to run. He forced himself toward the door, raising his flashlight. The music was clearer now, a simple, haunting tune. The room was an old nursery, lined with empty cribs. In the corner, a small, ornate music box sat on a dusty table. Its lid was open, and its tiny metal cylinder was slowly, impossibly, turning. As he stared, terrified, the music box suddenly clicked and stopped. The silence that rushed in was deafening. And in that silence, from the crib nearest to him, came a tiny, soft whisper. "Will you play with me?" Frank didn't wait to see what was in the crib. He stumbled backward, out of the room, and fled. He ran the entire length of the hall, scrambled into the elevator, and jammed the button for the ground floor. As the doors slid shut, he saw it. For a fraction of a second, a small, dark face was peeking out of the nursery doorway. He never went back into the West Wing. He filed a report about a faulty music box. It was the only rational thing he could put on paper. But he knew what he heard, and he knew that some children never, ever leave the hospital. Okay, we're halfway through. And if your heart is pounding like mine is, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It tells us you want more stories like these, and it makes sure you don't miss what's coming next. Now, let's get back to the darkness. Section 4, The Face in the Static. Our next story comes from a guy named Marcus, who worked for a remote surveillance company. From a command center hundreds of miles away, he watched dozens of properties on his screens, mostly empty storefronts and quiet suburban streets. One of his assignments was a big, modern house in a wealthy, gated community. The family had a top-of-the-line camera system. Marcus watched the front gate, the backyard, the front door, and a wide-angle camera inside the main living room. That fear of someone hacking your cameras, of a stranger watching your family, is a uniquely modern terror. This story is a chilling reminder that sometimes the threat isn't outside the door. It started with a glitch. Just before 4 a.m., the camera in the living room began to flicker, the image freezing and dissolving into a pixelated mess before snapping back, annoying but not alarming. Marcus was about to file a maintenance request when, during one of the flickers, something happened that turned his blood to ice. For a single frame, just a fraction of a second, as the image dissolved into static, a face filled the screen. It was pale, stretched, and distorted by the digital noise, but it was a face. The eyes were wide and dark, staring right into the lens. The mouth was open in a silent scream. An instant later, it was gone, replaced by the image of the quiet, empty living room. Marcus physically recoiled. He had to be imagining it. He rewound the feed, his heart pounding, and played it back frame by frame. There, the feed pixelated. And for one single, horrifying frame, hidden in the noise, was the face. It wasn't a reflection. It was as if someone was standing so close to the camera, their face filled the lens, and their image had been burned into the signal. The family was upstairs, sleeping. He checked the other camera's door locked, gate closed, but that camera was inside the house. He followed protocol for a home invasion, activating the two-way audio. This is your remote security monitoring service. We have detected a system anomaly and need to verify the security of your home. His voice boomed into the silent house. No response. Hello, this is remote security. Is anyone there? Still nothing. His hand hovered over the button to dispatch the police. That's when the living room camera flickered again, but it didn't return to an empty room. The feed was now dark and tilted, pointing up at the ceiling. The camera was on the floor, and he could hear something, a faint, rhythmic scratching. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Then, a voice whispered through the camera's mic, low and guttural. We see you, it rasped, watching. Marcus slammed the button to dispatch the police. An automated signal went out, high priority home invasion in progress. He switched the audio to one way, so he could only listen. The scratching continued. Then a low, wet chuckle came from right beside the camera. Then the feed went dead. Signal lost. The 10 minutes it took for police to arrive were the longest of Marcus's life. He watched on the front door camera as they arrived and used his remote access to unlock the door for them. After an eternity, an officer's voice came over the local police channel. Central, this is Unit 7. We've cleared the residence. Family is secure upstairs, all asleep. No signs of forced entry. I don't know what to make of this. Another voice asked, What do you have? 7. A pause. The living room is clear, but the camera that was on the mantelpiece is on the floor, and there's something written on the wall behind it. Looks like it was scratched into the paint. The homeowner is asking what it says. The officer said, his voice strained. We're not sure. We should tell her. Another long pause. Then, the officer spoke, his voice low. It says, We see you watching. The company's official report called it a sophisticated hack. They never could explain the face in the static, or how someone moved the camera and scratched a message on the wall without waking anyone. Marcus quit the next day. He believes that for a few minutes that night, something wasn't just hacking a camera. It was using it as a door. Section 5, the man who watched back. Veteran guards will tell you the job is 99% boredom and 1% pure terror. This story is about that 1%. It comes from Al, a guy who worked the graveyard shift at a downtown corporate high-rise for 20 years. Al was old school. He trusted his own eyes more than any camera. His post was a grand marble lobby. His desk faced the monitors, but also looked out through huge glass windows onto the empty street. At 3:33 a.m., a motion light flickered on a camera aimed across the street. A man was standing there in the plaza. He was tall, wearing a heavy overcoat that was too warm for the season, and he was standing perfectly still. He wasn't fidgeting or looking at a phone. He was just standing in the middle of the plaza, staring up at Al's building. Al logged it. 3:34 a.m. unknown, male loitering in plaza across the street. Observing. He zoomed the camera in, but a wide-brimmed hat hid the man's face in shadow. Still, Al could feel the intensity of his stare, even through the screen. For 10 minutes, the man didn't move a muscle. It felt wrong, purposeful. Then, as if he knew Al was watching, the man slowly turned his head, not his body, just his head, a slow, deliberate rotation until he was looking right over his shoulder, directly into the camera lens hundreds of feet away. Al's breath caught. He couldn't see a face, just a black void under the hat, but he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the man was looking right at him. Al instinctively leaned back, his heart hammering. He panned the camera away, waited 30 seconds, then slowly panned back. The plaza was empty. A wave of relief washed over Al. He laughed weakly, a shaky sound in the silent lobby. The night shift was finally getting to him. He got up to stretch his legs, walked to the massive front windows, and looked out at the empty plaza himself. Nothing. He felt foolish. He turned from the window, and his gaze fell on his own reflection in the polished black marble wall of the lobby. He saw himself, his uniform, the desk, the monitors, and his heart stopped. Reflected in the marble, standing right behind his empty chair, was the man in the overcoat. Al didn't scream. He couldn't. He was frozen, staring at the impossible reflection. The man in the reflection slowly lifted his head, and from the black void under his hat, 2 points of faint, white light ignited, like tiny, distant stars. Al broke free. He spun around to face his desk. No one was there. The office was empty. He whipped his head back to the marble wall. The reflection was normal now, just him and his empty desk. He stumbled backward, hand fumbling for the panic button. Was it a trick of the light, or had something stood in that empty space for just a moment, something that could only be seen in a reflection? Al retired a month later. He never told anyone the full story. He didn't have to. For the rest of his life, he avoided looking at his own reflection, terrified he'd see the man with stars for eyes, watching him back. Section 6, The Stairwell Signal. Our final story is an adaptation of a deeply unsettling piece of footage that some of you might have seen online. It comes from a guard named Marco, who monitored a residential apartment building. One of the most boring cameras was the one in the main emergency stairwell, a fixed camera pointed down from the top floor, covering all 6 flights of stairs in a single, dizzying shot. At 3:47 a.m., the stairwell motion sensor went off. A figure in a dark jumpsuit had entered from the 4th floor, but they moved, strangely, Their movements were jerky, unnatural. They'd walk a few steps down, stop cold, turn, walk a few steps back up. It was like watching a corrupted video file. But this was live. The figure never showed its face, always keeping it turned toward one of the four walls. Marco was puzzled. Was this person drunk? Having a medical issue, he decided he had to check. He logged it. 3:52 a.m. individual exhibiting strange behavior in main stairwell. Investigating. He took the elevator to the 5th floor to enter the stairwell from above. On the small monitor in the elevator, the figure was still there, still doing its bizarre, disjointed dance. He pushed open the heavy fire door. He looked down the long flights of stairs. It was completely empty. Impossible. He'd just seen the person seconds ago. Confused, he pulled out his phone and brought up the live camera feed. His heart just about stopped on his phone's screen. The figure was still there, on the 3rd floor landing, walking its weird pattern, but looking with his own eyes. There was nothing. A digital ghost. An apparition only the camera could see. He stood frozen on the top landing, watching the feed on his phone. A horrifying thought started to form. The movements weren't random. It was a pattern, a signal. His monitor bank in the office was a grid, 4 cameras across, 4 down. What if the movements corresponded to the other cameras? His mind raced. The figure walks to the left wall. That's the camera on the left of the stairwell feed in his office. The parking garage. Walks to the right. The lobby camera. Walks down a flight. The cameras on the row below. It wasn't just walking. It was pointing. It was using the stairwell as a giant cursor. With trembling hands, he tried to decipher the message. The figure moved to a position corresponding to the bottom row of his monitor bank. It stopped, facing left. The server room camera, it moved right. The electrical room, it moved to the far right. The spot for his own office, it stopped there. And for the first time, it broke its pattern. It turned very slowly to face the camera, to face up the stairs, to face him. Its head was a smooth, dark oval. No face. And as Marco watched in horror on his phone, it raised one long, thin arm and pointed directly at him. Boom. The fire door behind him, the one he had just come through, slammed shut with a deafening crash that echoed through the concrete stairwell. Marco screamed. He dropped his phone and scrambled, tripping and falling down the stairs in a desperate panic. He burst out of the ground floor door, ran through the lobby, and out into the pre-dawn light. He just kept running. The official report cited an equipment malfunction. They could never explain the images on the tape. The night shift is a different world. When you're the one standing guard over it, the line between what's real and what's not can get dangerously thin. The hum of a server, the flicker of a screen, the profound, crushing silence. It's a recipe for messing with your head. Were these events real? Were they just tricks of light, or the products of sleep-deprived minds? Or did these guards capture something from beyond our understanding? The footage exists, but the explanations don't. These stories are a chilling reminder that when you're the only one watching, you can never be sure who or what might be watching you back. The sun is coming up, but night will fall again. And somewhere out there, a lone guard is settling in, his eyes on the screens, waiting for the world to go quiet. What have your cameras captured in the dead of night if you have your own story, a weird experience on a lonely shift? Share it in the comments below. We'd all like to know we're not alone in the dark.